হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আমিও ল্যাপটপেই ঢুকেছি। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, না একটা লিঙ্কে বোধহয় ক্লিক করলে হবে না, ওখানে দেখবেন আপনি তো এটা জুম। হ্যালো রঞ্জন বলছি, সুগতদা আমাকে এইমাত্র ফোন করলেন, আমার কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে? হ্যালো রঞ্জন বলছি, সুগতদা আমাকে একটু ফোন করলেন। সুগতদা ঠিক বুঝতে পারছেন না যে মিটিং লিঙ্কটা কি হবে। রঞ্জন বলছি
স্যার 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 আমরা অন এয়ারে চলে গেছি স্যার, আমরা অন এয়ারে চলে গেছি, আপনাকে আমি ফোন করছি।
আচ্ছা 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 আচ্ছা, বুঝতে পারছেন না যে মিটিং লিঙ্কটা কি হবে।
স্যার আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
তুই তাহলে ফোন কর না রে ভাই, একটু কথা বলে নি।
আমি স্যার 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 আমরা অন এয়ারে চলে গেছি স্যার, আমরা অন এয়ারে চলে গেছি, আপনাকে আমি ফোন করছি।
আচ্ছা 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 আচ্ছা,
Sugata sir, has you come in, Sugata sir?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I am
Thank
here.
you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
I'm here.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Good evening to one and all present here. We now have in our midst our very esteemed guests. With the ever encouraging permission of Father, I extend my warm welcome to our dear audience to today's webinar on trade and development, organized by the Postgraduate Department of Economics, St. Xaviers College Autonomous, Kolkata. Many economic commentators claim that we live in an era of growing inequality. 2020 has been one year that has stood testimony to this, and an unprecedented change in every strata of the society has resulted in the inequality to become even more glaring. The literature on trade and development is copious. Trade affects simultaneously economic prosperity and various forms of inequality, which leads to differences in living standards within a country and across nations. Trade may turn out to be an uncertain glory. It is in this light that we present to you this opportunity for enlightenment by our resource person. Gracing the occasion today, we have with us Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Savio S.J., Principal, St. Xaviers College Autonomous, Kolkata. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Savio needs no introduction, but we believe it is our humble duty to illuminate you on the rich legacy which he has created for himself. Father has been a professor of economics at St. Xaviers College, in charge of the BBA department, vice principal of Commerce Morning and BBA, and rector. He is also the president of the St. Xaviers College Alumni Association. Despite his busy administrative schedule, Father is deeply engaged in academic work and research. He has been awarded his PhD by the Bardhaman University for his thesis titled Impact of World Trade Organization on Indian Agricultural Trade. Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Savio is the recipient of the prestigious Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Award for his contribution to higher education in 2017, as well as the Award for Excellence in Education and Philanthropy by the Bengal National Chamber of Commerce and Industry in April 2018. Father has played an influential role in reviving Eco Echoes, the annual economics journal published by the Postgraduate Department of Economics, St. Xaviers College, Kolkata. Under his leadership, the Postgraduate Department of Economics has also organized numerous seminars and conferences in the past. In these extremely challenging times, Father has been leading the college with his unparalleled leadership and his mentorship qualities. He has been a source of inspiration for all of us. I now request Dr. Parthopratim Ghosh, Senior Faculty Member of the Postgraduate Department of Economics, and the Coordinator of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, to welcome Father to address this webinar.
Thank you, Shalini. Dear Father, on behalf of our department, of which you are very much an integral part, we now request you to kindly declare the webinar open with your welcome address. Please come in, Father. Father, kindly unmute yourself.
Very good evening to Professor Sugata Marjit. Welcome to this webinar. We are meeting after a long time, so warm welcome to this your input session. It is my pleasure to welcome you all at the webinar on trade and development. A new Ricardian theory, Ricardian model of trade, growth, and inequality, organized by the Postgraduate Department of Economics, Xaviers College, Kolkata. In the fitness of things, today's webinar is graced by an internationally reputed trade theorist and an academician of a very high order, Professor Sugata Marjit, who had chosen to speak on a new aspect of the Ricardian model of trade, highlighting its implications on growth and inequality. As we all know, Professor Sugata Marjit is the first distinguished professor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. He was the former Vice Chancellor of the Kolkata University and former Chairman of West Bengal State Council of Higher Education. He was the RB Professor of Industrial Economics and the former Director at the Center's Studies in Social Sciences, Kolkata. Since the inception of economic thought, theories of international trade and development have been mainstay of mainstream as well as radical economics. Ricardian theory of international trade is not a typical static theory of comparative advantage, as was conventionally seen. There are many important dynamics at play in David Ricardo's works, which had then escaped the attention of the readers. In his book, Trade, Mercantile, Capital and Economic Development, Professor Mihi Rakshit had discussed many such contentious issues pertaining to several dimensions of trade, growth, and development. One of the pertinent questions that remain in the focus is its plausible role in driving growth or perpetuating exploitation. There is ample empirical evidence which clearly point towards the beneficiary role of trade in employment generation as a vent for surplus, promotion of infant industries, increased international competitiveness, and exposure to larger international markets, enabling the realization of economies of scale. On the contrary, trade has also led to indiscriminate exploitation of natural resources, especially in less developed countries, and deteriorating terms of trade of developing countries, impoverishing them further. International demonstration effect and backwash effect are certain important phenomena which explain how trade can be a hindrance to growth. Globalization has no doubt led to greater regional as well as global integration of the nations of the world through opening of international trade. Vertical disintegration of production lines, enhancing comparative price advantages, greater market access, financial market liberalization, and knowledge spillover, as well as spread of technological innovations. Globalization has benefited both developing and developed countries in many ways. Globalization affects income inequality in mainly two ways: skill biased technological change and changing patterns in consumer behavior. In this context of widening inequality in the so-called global village, Thomas Piketty's work is a worthy mention. Inequality, according to him, is not an inevitable outcome of the Institute of Globalization, but more of an ideological and political choice that societies opt for. Through his work, Piketty not only draws upon the historical role of the traditional slave societies and colonialism in the formation of modern inequality, but also thematically discusses the system of justification that perpetuated this inequality as a natural outcome of economic life. In the same breath, I want to raise another question. Is globalization a panacea for all kinds of socio-economic ailments? What can be the cogent arguments in defense of globalization? The response to these questions are evident in the poor Asian economies such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Cambodia, where large numbers of women now work in garment export factories. Their wages are low by world standards, but much higher than what they would earn in alternate occupations. The benefits of globalization can be caused by analyzing what happens when these channels of globalizations are absent. In 1993, an estimated 50,000 children were dismissed by the garment industry in Bangladesh, owing to an anticipated US ban on import of goods that utilize child labor. Investigation by UNICEF and other local aid groups found that only 10,000 among these children resumed their education, while the others ended up in inferior and hazardous occupations. Thus, severe limitations of existing opportunities of the poor and the possible ramifications of fair trade policies must be recognized. This webinar, I am confident, will be an enriching experience with Professor Sugata Marjit, deliberating on trade and development. The faculty members of the Department of Economics always recommended Professor Sugata Marjit's book and works for both UG and PG students. He has always been a very good friend of St. Xaviers College, and I would like to mention when he was a Vice Chancellor of Kolkata University, we were given a special permission to start the PhD program. I think it's very much, I don't think anybody thought of before, afterwards. It is because of him, St. Xaviers is able to independently run the PhD program. I think we'll be ever indebted to Professor Marjit for giving this. It's a great privilege to St. Xaviers College. I gratefully remember this evening. I thank him on behalf of St. Xaviers College and Xaverian fraternity. I would also love to mention that both the teachers and students of UG and PG Department of St. Xaviers College Economics are well conversant with his works on general equilibrium and trade. He is a true source of inspiration for researchers, teachers, and students in the domain of economics. In a special way, I would like to thank our postgraduate students within 2 years, 2 months of their stay, and they have taken a great initiative to invite Professor Sugata Marjit, the great economist, for this evening, enlightening seminar. I wish them all the best. I thank them. And also I thank all the faculty members for encouraging students. I wish this webinar a success. Wish you all the best. May God bless you.
Thank you, respected Father, for your constant guidance, support, and ever-inspiring words. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my proud privilege to introduce to you our speaker for the day, Professor Sugata Marjit. Professor Marjit is the first distinguished professor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Before joining IIFT, he held the RBI professorship at the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta, and first Sukumar Chakraborty professorship at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is also a former Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University. Professor Marjit has delivered invited lectures and taught at more than 50 universities across continents, including those of Bonn, Columbia, Copenhagen, Cornell, Queen Mary, London, Monash, Munich, Rochester, Rotterdam, University College London, etc. He has been a visiting scholar at the IMF and Federal Reserve Bank, St. Louis, wider, etc. He has published close to 200 papers in journals such as the American Economic Review, Journal of Economic Theory, International Economic Review, European Economic Review, Journal of Development Economics, Journal of International Economics, Economic Theory, etc., and in books and volumes of Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Springer Nature, Princeton University Press, etc. Professor Marjit is the winner of Mahalanobis Gold Medal of the Indian Econometric Society 2002 and the VKRV Rao National Prize 2003 as a young social scientist, the two most coveted national awards for economists in India and among very few to have won both. His paper on globalization and inequality won the GDN World Bank Best Paper Award 2003. In 2018, he received the Careers 360 National Award from the MHRD Minister, Government of India, as the most outstanding researcher in economics, econometrics, and finance in India based on academic output in journals, citations, and H index. He was invited as university-wide distinguished visitor from Asia by the Queen Mary University of London, being nominated by many departments of the university. We extend our warm welcome to you, Professor, and we are extremely grateful to have you here with us today. I request the audience to note that Professor Marjit's lecture will be followed by an interactive session. You are requested to post your questions in the comment section. I would now like to call upon Dr. Ranjananendra Narayan Nag, Senior Faculty Member of the Postgraduate Department of Economics and the convener of this webinar, to welcome Professor Marjit.
On behalf of Xaviers College Autonomous, I cordially invite Professor Sugata Marjit to deliver his keynote address. Yes, I just would like to mention he has a very special interest in macroeconomics and is an outstanding teacher apart from his terrific research skill almost in all fields. I request Sugata to deliver his keynote address. Thank you, Sugata.
Professor Marjit, if you can please unmute yourself.
Always forget. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me over. Thank you, Professor and Father Principal Dominic. We know each other for a long time now, and thanks for your gracious introduction. Also to St. Xaviers College for Postgraduate and Economics Department for inviting me over for this talk. Of course, I would say, because I have friends in your college, I have students in your college, and my association with St. Xaviers goes a long way, because my post-high school career started in St. Xaviers College. I was a student of BCom honors at St. Xaviers for about 15 days before I switched to economics at Presidency College. Anyway, today I am, okay, just a second. I think okay, thank you. Let me go straight into the topic of this seminar today, or the webinar today. Actually, I'm presenting something today which is very different from the research seminars or papers I usually present. This is a topic on which this is the first presentation. So this is the first formal presentation of the seminar paper, which I'm going to present subsequently in many places actually. And chosen Xaviers because I think that there are faculty members here, there are students. In general, people will be interested in what I'm talking about. Before I go to my slides, I start sharing the slides with you. Let me tell a bit about the spirit of this topic of research. This is very new research for me. As professional economists who are involved in teaching and research in the subject, we all know that economics, I would say unfortunately, is a subject which always entertains fashionable research. So, or chemistry, for that pure science or applied science, because where the research is dictated by things that are still unknown, things that are still not discovered. In economics, we actually do research on topics on which many people have done work before. And also we try to find out what is fashionable now, what everybody else is doing, and what would quickly get us some publications or would actually be liked by the peer group who's dominating the profession and so on. Now, these are some of the inside words of the profession, of which I have been a member now for more than 35 years. So I have earned the right of saying something regarding these fads and fashions. Hardly we go back and look back to history. There used to be a very vibrant part of economics which used to be taught in our student days, and in fact, more so when before we are students. This was history of economic thought, and talking about the works of many stalwarts who made their mark in history and for whom actually the subject of economics was finally brought into this world. And often we forget about them, we don't teach about them, and students eventually do not care about what these guys have done. Although most of the major contributors in modern times in economics, in particular, I shall highlight Paul Samuelson, who even in his last days was working on issues raised by David Ricardian. In fact, many brilliant economists of yesteryears have concentrated on the work of great economic historians or historians or scholars who have contributed in 17th, 18th, 19th century. So this paper partly is about history of economic thought. That is the first and foremost characterization of this work, which I think is important to kind of appreciate. What I'm going to do in my paper is to show to you that if we follow the classical methodology of modeling economic theory, a very, very fundamental part of classical methodology, which is wage fund theory, as theory of bringing in finance in economics, and then apply that kind of an apparatus to the simplest general equilibrium model that we teach our students, and which is remarkably rich in terms of its conclusions and insights, the Ricardian trade model. If we put them together, then first we will prove that a large part of neoclassical production theory looks redundant. That is, we can derive substantial results of neoclassical economics regarding relationship between factor prices, commodity prices, about factor markets, growth, distribution, and so on, based on a model which does not require production function, cost functions, marginal productivity theory of distribution, Cobb-Douglas, CRS, and all that. So this is the first contribution of this paper, or supposed to be contribution, that I'm trying to introduce a new way of theorizing microeconomics from the production side, and of course from the general equilibrium side. When people are interested in bringing in finance into the picture, rather than using capital as an input of production, I use capital as provider of finance, and because production inherently is a dynamic concept. Then what I do in this paper is how iconic results of very important models of economics, like Solow model of growth, how these results are captured by this kind of a framework, which doesn't need to assume a large number of assumptions that we usually make to prove some of the fundamental results. So I look at Solow model very carefully. And the third, and I think is very important from contemporary perspective, that not only this contributes to history of economic thought, as if we are devising a model that lies between what the classical economists thought in 18th century or 19th century and what neoclassical economics finally brought in to the platform, to the forum in 20th century. So this is a model which was not attempted. Had it been attempted, then it could have preempted a large body of neoclassical literature or some fundamental issues. The third point is that this particular framework is capable of analyzing many contemporary issues regarding trade, growth, and inequality. And as I go on, I shall also tell you how this can be extended from the simple two-sector Ricardian model to specific factor model, to Heckscher-Ohlin model, to Krugman's product variety trade model, and so on. So this actually opens up a door which was closed so far. It opens up an avenue through which we never traded. And it tells to the students and economics teachers to rethink about how to teach microeconomic theory in much simpler terms. And yet getting certain fundamental results that we always use or we always teach our students, get those fundamental results in place. So let me now try to share my work, the slides. Okay. Can everyone see the slide or slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So if I'm not audible or if I'm not visible, and the slides are not visible, immediately tell me, okay? Because sometimes the machines create problems, and I'm not very sort of fond of machines because I don't trust them and I don't understand them. So please tell me. So this is a new Ricardian model of trade, growth, and inequality. Let me try to. Okay. So what is the notation? This is essentially a paper on history of economic thought, highlighting the classical interpretation of the neoclassical system through the lens of the Ricardian trade model. But it contains a host of results of contemporary relevance and which are broadly consistent with stylized empirical evidence. Noting that credit market is generally missing in conventional trade models, we focus on how to introduce this to the basic textbook Ricardian model. We introduce the classical wedge fund or working capital as K, or that's the notation I'll use, and thus allow the Ricardian model to have both capital and labor. Then we compare this with the major workhorse of the profession, the neoclassical model with capital and labor. Our new Ricardian model surprisingly generates results very similar to neoclassical models without any neoclassical tools such as smooth production functions, cost functions, entity theory, CRS, and all that. The model points towards an independent way to learn microeconomic theory of production, where K is only used as finance and not as a factor of production. And we then use this model for analyzing trade, growth, etc. You see, the way we treat capital in our standard courses is to take it inside the production process as an input that can be substituted by other factors. Though we all know that in reality, factor substitution can be very rare. Once you choose a specific technology, typically the factor substitution possibilities are not that much. But anyway, we choose capital as an input in the process of production, like labor or land, and we treat them interchangeably. I can put X, Y, Z, or capital, land, and labor. In my approach, we deliberately eliminate that role of capital. There is no capital in the production process itself. But what is capital is essentially, it's a loan from the bank. It is a stock of finance, which is used to finance production by employing only labor. Now, this concept is actually the wedge fund. That is, at beginning of the period T, let's say, or the initial period before the production starts, the system is endowed with a stock of credit. Thus, we have a new Ricardian model with capital and labor both, and capital is completely outside the production process. This is consciously done. So the question, some questions might arise that, well, capital in process of production is also very much part of reality. Why you are doing this, that capital is only finance? I consciously and deliberately do this to see what K just as a source of finance does to the simplest general equilibrium system. So it is a deliberate choice. And as I shall go later, I shall talk about, well, I won't have time today to talk about all the extensions, but as I shall highlight the Heckscher-Ohlin type of a model, I shall bring in some sort of substitutability or some other inputs in process of production, but still retaining role of capital as the financial source. So what it does, it replicates the model of growth, including modified golden rule of accumulation. The K by L and W by R relationship in this model is exactly the same as one derives with marginal productivity theory. There is no need of production function, isoquants, cost function, diminishing returns, or CRS. This yields results of contemporary relevance, such as trade always increases income gap between K and L, labor share of income declines independent of what you trade, trade increases growth temporarily, but it is not sustainable. And there are other results also. As I shall unfold my arguments, you will see. We also show that W cannot increase without accumulation of capital. Technological progress does not help labor, but helps capital, that is the financiers. It is research and development which can continuously sustain growth. Tendency of a capitalist process is to undermine accumulation for production vis-a-vis R&D, as W tends to grow with the former but not with the latter. Finance can flow only to the R&D sector, eliminating production completely. Financial crisis may not hurt capital but only labor. With sectors employing different skills, rising wage gap and rising R by W both can go hand in hand, echoes the concern of Piketty's 2013 book. Now, I must warn you because there are many results in this paper, but the basic model is textbook Ricardian. So most of the teachers who are conversant with the trade theory, to them, it would just be a peanut. You know, it's not really a very technically complex paper, but the concepts are a bit different from how we model the Ricardian trade model as such. And so therefore, if anybody is interested in asking me questions, you know, if you could collect this question as I go along, and I don't, of course, expect you to ask me because maybe my flow would be disturbed. But I think that if you remember, if you choose a question, you can note it down so that you can remember when you want to ask me, because there may be many questions that you would like to ask me. So let me just do a brief literature. It's a research paper, so it's not a pedagogic. It's not only of only pedagogic value. So it's research paper. So I'm going to talk about a bit about literature. Finance have been discussed in papers, but not systematically, and largely ignored and scattered in the context of pattern of trade, factor price movements, inequality, development in economies. For a quick look, one may refer to Jones and Marjit, 2001, AER, Matsuyama, 2005, Journal of European Economic Association, Antras and Caballero, 2009, JP, Journal of Political Economy, Manova, 2013, Review of Economic Studies, Bandopadhyay, Marjit and Young, 2014, Canadian Journal of Economics, Marjit and Mishra, 2020, which is in working paper form, but it should be published in Review of International Economics. And then these papers are where they have attempted to model capital or as finance in the context of trade theory or policy. But all of these models were basically about imperfect credit market and its impact on trade, and some sort of things like that. But none of these papers actually brings in finance or introduces basic idea of finance in a completely sort of a perfect competitive market condition, but introduces finance in the basic microeconomic model. So what I'm doing, I am just starting off by introducing finance in a particular way to the basic general equilibrium model. So the finance or the financial institution or the financial market is not complicated at all. It's very, very much, it's a competitive kind of a setup. But what it does to these models, that's my purpose. It's not really how I'm going to tell you a story about how the world is evolving around this model. This is about understanding the microeconomic framework that we are interested in, we are accustomed about, and understanding that framework along with a notion of finance. So it is far, far more preliminary, primary, and I guess far more fundamental so far as the introduction of the subject is concerned. However, as I said earlier, it's a history of economic thought paper. So, I'm going to talk a bit about history of economic thought because I'm tempted to do that, because these days, not many people do, talk about this. If you look at the wedge fund theory, the wedge fund, I think the name was given by John Stuart Mill in 1848, although Ricardo was using it. In 1817, famous work, Ricardo and why Ricardo, Malthus and everybody, they were talking about wedge fund. Wedge fund is like a kind of fund that would be used to employ labor, employ workers, because production will start from point T and will be completed at point T plus 1. The workers should not starve to death. So the workers, the wage bill has to be paid. How that would be paid? It would be paid as an advance from a financier. And that's the wage fund. Once the wage, workers are utilized in production process, output is produced, and then the output is sold in the market, and the loan is paid back with principal and interest. The classical system, of course, there was this important sector called agriculture. However, the industrial accumulation was taking place or the capitalist accumulation was taking place in the industrial sector. And the whole idea of Ricardo's stationary state comes from the fact that real wage was fixed in terms of subsistence level, and supply of labor was unlimited at that real wage, and real wage was fixed in terms of corn. So Ricardo argued that if we can import corn cheaper, then the rate of profit would increase. Capitalists will accumulate more because rate of profit is the indicator of accumulation, and the system will grow. But if corn was more expensive, then it will not happen, and the system will reach a stationary state because rate of profit will fall. And that's why Britain should trade according to comparative advantage by exporting industrial goods and importing corn. So he prescribed the repeal of corn law, which was repealed in 1846. That is, corn law was a device of protection, protecting the landlord's interest by imposing a tariff on corn, which is imported from abroad. So trade was incidentally stimulus to growth, because as the import barriers on import of corn would be removed, the price of corn will fall, rate of profit will increase, and accumulation will take place. So Ricardo was the first theorist who actually modeled endogenous growth via international trade. Now, unfortunately, really unfortunately, that even the top Ivy League schools of the world, people teaching trade and growth fail to refer to Ricardo. Ricardo is the first theorist who has dealt with trade and endogenous growth. It is only through trade that corn could be made cheaper, and hence labor would be less expensive because labor would be fed corn. And as labor would be less expensive, rate of profit will increase and industrial revolution would be hastened. Otherwise, it will be delayed. So Ricardo's contribution is very important. I guess this paper is also about Solow, about Caves and Jones's, of course, many editions. Hicks and Hollander in 1977 QJE Quarterly Journal, they talked about, what I do in this paper is I preserve the full employment condition of labor. I don't bring in unemployment, because I am trying to replicate the Ricardian trade model, which actually has a full employment condition. So I'm applying the wage fund hypothesis to full employment condition. But no classical and neoclassical economist who talked about wage fund ever talked about how wage fund model could be applied to a fully employed economy. Because to them, they were discussing the classical hypothesis. And the classical economists talked about unemployment, structural unemployment, growth with unlimited supplies of labor. Like, I should have mentioned Arthur Lewis's paper. I'm sorry I missed that. But so the question is, the difference from this approach and my approach is that I bring in full employment model. I don't distort the system anyway, except that, excuse me, the system can only operate if we can finance the system. Without finance, the system does not start off. So there are several other papers, Finlay's 1995 Ohlin lectures, or Steedman's 1979 Fundamental Issues in Trade Theory, is a representative of Struffian model of Ricardian system. Finlay's 1995 Ohlin lectures is summary of all his contributions. He is a fantastic contributor in the realm of neoclassical interpretation of Ricardo. Then, of course, the Jones's 65 structure of general equilibrium paper and his recent book on competitive trade models from World Scientific Press. Then Marjit and Kaur, this volume from Cambridge University Press in 2018, the 50th year of the structure of simple general equilibrium problems. Then Jones and Marjit, 2009, again related to competitive trade theory, this in economic theory. And Andre Maneshi is another person who has worked extensively on history of economic thought and Ricardian models. And one sample of his work is Oxford Economic Papers 83. But all these papers, and of course, dealing with Ricardo or classical economists, are basically dealing with unemployment. Now, I can handle unemployment in this model, but that's not the purpose of my model, because I try to devise a framework which is a textbook type framework, and the unemployment would be an extension of this framework, which we can see how it can happen. So I'm just skipping this because I'm going to go. Let's now look at the new Ricardo model. Surprisingly, the new Ricardo model is exactly like the old Ricardo model, except very little changes. And the first equation is the cornerstone of all these models, which I call new Ricardian structure. That is, total amount of credit, K, let's say $100 with which you start, 100 rupees with which you start, is actually given as an advance for employing workers in the system, which is W into L. So if L, suppose there are 10 people you have to employ and then 100 rupees as credit, then the wage that you can pay, maximum wage that you can pay, is actually $10. Because that's the wage bill, it can be funded. No matter, after you employ this labor L, then the entire production process starts. So you can use this equation 1 as a labor demand, labor supply equation. K by W tells you the maximum labor that you can employ. And K by W is a negatively sloped, is a negative function of W. As W goes up, given K, K by W falls. So that's the demand for labor. And if there is a given supply of labor, then that equation will determine the wage rate, because supply of credit or supply of labor has to be equal to demand for labor. Or this can be supply of credit is equal to demand for credit, because K is your supply of credit and W into L is your demand for credit. So this equation tells you, if I know what is K, if I know what is L in the system, then I know W in the system, and that is K by L. And look at this relation. W is positively related to K by L. Now, if you do Cobb-Douglas production function or CRS production function, this is just, if you do the first order condition, find out the demand for labor, then you can find out that the wages will, because as K by L increases, marginal product of labor increases. But I don't have to go through that route. I can take the credit market equilibrium or the credit market relationship, and immediately I can get a downward sloping demand curve. It has got nothing to do with diminishing marginal product of labor. It is just the compulsion that if you started with a credit of 100 rupees, and if you have 10 rupees as the wage, then you can just employ 10 people. And as you increase the wage rate, you can employ fewer people. Okay. Then we have these two very familiar price equation, wage times the labor coefficient per unit labor requirement. But mind you, now the price has to compensate for the principal, but the interest that you pay on this wage cost. So the second equation is the average cost of production for the first good. The third is the average cost of production of the second good. But the interest becomes important issue here, okay? Because you have to pay back the interest, principal with interest. So it's no longer WAL1 is WAL1, but it is WAL1 times 1 plus R. That is, your relative demand would be a function of only relative price. That has to be equal to X1 by X2. Mind you, x1 by x2, okay, that, you know, is because the relative demand is only a function of relative price. And then there is this endowment equation that your total L has to be absorbed between x1 and x2. So 4 and 5 will solve for x1 and x2. So this is exactly similar to the Ricardian model, except, you know, because if you divide 2 by 3, this is exactly the relative price still is equal to the labor coefficients, and the comparative cost analysis remains exactly the same, no problem. However, the main problem here is that the wage rate is determined by K by L. That is, if your stock of capital or stock of labor does not change, or K by L remains the same, then W cannot change. So what you instead, you know, solve for is the rate of interest, because your W is already solved for by K by L. So how this system, so as I said, given labor supply, and, you know, because that's the demand curve for labor, we can determine the W is determined to clear the market. So now, given this structure, couple of things. This is a full, you know, first part I have already said that this is exactly the property of a CRS production function, because if K by L increases, then your W increases and your R must fall, which means your W by R must fall. So if K by L increases, your W by R falls. This is exactly the property of a CRS production function. Of course, we have here a trivial CRS because you have fixed coefficient, so it is proportional. But this is not constant terms to scale as we understand. It's not Cobb-Douglas or anything. But even without CRS, we have a monotonic and increasing relationship between K by L and W by R. This is a full employment model. Credit does not determine output. It is L which determines output, like in a Ricardian model. Now, if I could have introduced unemployment here so that the wage rate was fixed, and then the credit would have told you how many people you could employ, then employment will be determined by credit K, hence output will also be determined. Because then credit has a role to play. This actually is, if people who are interested in understanding macroeconomics, you know, this is very, very interesting, because I am dealing with a classical system where full employment is there and so on and so forth, wages are flexible, blah, blah, blah. But if you consider the distortion of unemployment, making the wage rate fixed, then immediately you see credit has an impact on output. And it almost sounds as if monetary policy is not neutral. Monetary policy is effective. It has a shadow of Keynes, because then the supply of money matters, because you have unemployment. In case of full employment, as we can show, if K increases, given L, W will increase proportionately. And if W increases proportionately, given price, one thing can happen. If interest rate is given, price will increase proportionately, or R will fall proportionately. So the point is, if it is a full employment model, if it is a full employment model, then changes in supply of K is not going to affect output. If it is an unemployment model, it does. Does credit fluctuations impact wage rate in a full employment model? So what I'm saying is, think about financial crisis or financial boom. Then it will impact W in a full employment model. and will impact output in a model with unemployment. But in a full employment model, it cannot affect level of output. So this is a kind of relationship that we have. Now, I go to my first two propositions. International trade must reduce the real income of the workers, and inequality between labor and capital income rises independent of the pattern of trade, assuming that the workers do not own capital and earn less than the capitalists to start with. If workers own a part of the capital stock, their incomes can still go down, and inequality will surely rise even if their real income goes up. Now, what is happening with international trade? This is exactly what happens in Ricardo. You would be completely specialized. So if you are completely specialized, all capital will move to the sector. Let's take that you are exporting one and importing two. So in that case, all capital will go to sector one. Why they will go? Because relative price is higher. That's there in the world market. That's why you are completely specialized. If relative price is higher, rate of interest is higher, because W cannot change, because your K by L is fixed. So this implies that the real income of the workers must fall, because if the workers are consuming some of the export good and some of the import good, in terms of the import good it is increasing, but in some of the export good it is declining. But what I'm saying is that if the relative price is increasing, right? So in that case, what is going to happen is basically that usually happen if W does not, your P1 does not change. And your P2 is, and your 2 does not change. The average increases, so W real income must fall. Now, equality between labor and capital must increase, because capital income is rising and labor income is falling. Capital income is 1 plus R into K. That's the gross income. The net income is R into K. So if R is actually rising, then R into K is rising. Now, if workers own a part of the capital stock, their real income can still go down, because one part of the income is not going up. Workers may actually hold shares of stocks or whatever. Then one part of their income is rising, but the other part is not rising. So, but your consumer price index, that should rise, and that's the problem. And even if their real income goes up, someone who owns only capital, his real income will go up much more compared to those who partially own capital income. So these are some of the issues that there. Now I am talking about Solo's growth model, and I'm almost sure that all of you who are from economics have studied the basic Solo's growth model, and I'm going to basically replicate Solo's growth model, but from a completely different perspective. So let KT be the capital stock at T. Now capital stock here is the finance. Then I take this classical sort of approach where they say that all capital income is saved and invested. So the capital income is saved means that, that they started with some capital KT. Now they have earned something which is R times KT, and they're investing the entire amount. So the capital stock is growing by a rate R, because KT plus 1 is equal to KT into 1 plus R. LT plus 1 is equal to LT into 1 plus N. Then therefore, K by L grows at a rate 1 plus R by 1 plus N. Very, very simple. So basically, if R is greater than N, K by L is growing. If R is less than N, K by L is falling. So now I prove this Solo's proposition. A unique and stable state describe the proof. It's very simple. Just think of what happens if R is not equal to N. If R is greater than N, then K by L is growing. If K by L is growing, then the wage is growing. If the wage is growing, then R is falling. If R is falling, means that K by L grows at a slower rate. And it continuously happens in this fashion. So, till R becomes equal to N. Similarly, if K by L is growing, is not growing, is declining at a rate R less than N, then wage rate is falling. So the rate of return to capital is increasing. So the growth rate of capital starts going up till that reaches N. So therefore, the unique steady state and stable growth rate is R equal to N. See, now in your memory, in your mind, you visualize the famous Solo's, stability, the growth equation and the diagram. You have a concave production function and you have a straight line to the origin depicting your N into small k, the capital labor ratio. Because the concave function has a unique intersection point with this line. When K by L is growing, the marginal product of capital
Sir? 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 Sir, can you hear me?
Okay. I did not. Now I can. It was unmuted, right? Now it is unmuted. Hello?
Yes, sir, it is unmuted.
Hello? Okay. Sorry, I do not know why it got muted, but I will just.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm just trying to see where is my transparency is gone. Sorry about it. I will just.
So you need to restart your presentation.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I do not know why it got muted, but I will just.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm just trying to see where is my transparency is gone. Sorry about it. Okay, sorry, I'll just. Okay, is it okay now? Can everybody hear me and see the slides?
So we can
Yes.
hear you slides as well.
Okay, good. So trade can temporarily boost up growth in per capita income because as your P increases, when you trade, your basically P increases, all capital moves to that sector because R is increasing. So K by L, you started from a steady state. So your K by L, your R is now greater than N. But it can only temporarily sustain it because eventually as K by L is growing, wage rates start rising. As wage rates start rising, your R will start falling. So the growth rate will start falling. So temporarily, you will grow at a faster rate than N, but then you will come back. Okay. Now, what is the optimal growth under free trade? Now, this is a result which I don't think I need to spend too much time. If you now pose it in a dynamic context, you can concentrate on the Euler's first order condition and optimal growth model and look at the steady state, then you get back the same modified golden rule where R would be equal to N plus the pure rate of time preference. And this is very simple. This is Phelps's 1965 paper. Now, 1965 paper was about optimal growth because he was trying to optimize, the maximize, consumption, per capita consumption kind of thing. And then modified golden rule came because they talked about the discounted optimization. And but here, because your entire capital income is saved and invested, so R is equal to N to start with. So Solo model is like an optimum growth model. Now, this is not my contribution. It is a contribution, I think, of Kaldor personality in 50s, 60s, where they could show that the classical assumption of that capitalist saving everything and investing can lead directly to golden rule. But anyway, in my model, the mechanism is entirely different. It is coming from Ricardian trade model. So I'm not replicating, I'm not sort of replicating their mechanism. I'm replicating their results. So in a way, Solow, Kaldor, Passanati, or Phelps, those are different papers. And in this paper, I can put all them together in terms of the replication of the results. Now, our assumption of K, only, it's like saying that the capitalists save and the workers only consume. You don't need that. You don't need that. Workers can also own capital. These issues are not important. The key is that, as in any neoclassical model with concave production function and CRS, W by L rises with K by L. It also always happens in this model without concavity. And hence the critical result that more accumulation means less incentive for further accumulation. Now, one result is, the same thing. I'm talking about the same thing. When K by L increases, W by R increases. So next step, your R falls. Your R falls, which means that the growth rate is falling. So higher K by L means lower growth rate. So this is also well-known unconditional convergence hypothesis. Because in Solow model, you have unconditional convergence, which this paper would also talk about. Now I have a very critical proposition. The proposition is that in this model, the capitalist, suppose we take the capitalist as the financiers only. So we are dichotomizing the classes, the capital and labor. So the technological, so the capitalists own K, workers own L. Okay. Capitalists will not be very happy by putting all their capital in production, because more capital they put in production, wage rate is going to, it's not giving them anything. Because okay, let me track back, just say, okay, so suppose there are two sectors. One is the production sector, which produces, and the other sector where new technologies are innovated. So in that model where your WAL1 into 1 plus R is equal to P, that's the completely specialized production structure, the production of X1. So you can produce X by employing labor as in the production sector, or you can have another sector where you can employ labor which will try to find out new technology, like the labor coefficient. Now, better technology you innovate, then of course, what is going to happen? Because your W is not going to change, because it's the same capital by labor ratio, but better technology will give you higher return to capital. So if I am a financier, I have some money to spend, I would say to hell with your production. I put all the money in technology. And I put all the money in technology because I know doesn't matter whether I give money in production or give money in technology, wage rate would be W, which is equal to K by L, because it is the total credit that I have, which is financing the wage bill. But if I say that I'm going to invest in technology or in R&D, I know that the lowering of average, the labor coefficient means more productive production process will increase the rate of return. So technological progress will increase return to K while W does not change. Therefore, one show that in this model, the capitalists will actually put all money in technology. Then people would say, if you put all money in technology, then what the hell are you going to produce? But that's where the international trade comes about. The capitalists would say that, okay, we'll produce that new technology and outsource it. We'll give it to India and let India produce all these garbages that we're going to import. Let us produce these iPhones and let China produce iPhone and gives us back. We'll produce the iPhone technology. So this would be a technology for sale kind of a model of Ricardian. That is, giving technology or putting credit in technology. That's where you see that the richer countries, maybe who can do this research because they have the capacity to innovate, then they would be least interested in producing goods. The goods will be produced by some countries where they don't have sort of knowledge to innovate. So the technology will be outsourced to them and they will do this. So this would be like a technology for sale argument. In fact, so I'm saying in the standard solo model, continuing growth can happen. I mean, continuing growth in per capita income. Mind you, in solo model, the absolute growth doesn't mean anything because per capita income is constant. But per capita income can grow if and only if technological progress takes place at constant rate. Since without it, K by L remains the same in a steady state, so is per capita income. Here, the same thing happens. Without R&D, it is bound to be zero growth for per capita income. But the capitalists have explicit incentive to go for technological progress, and to boost R and W is insulated as K by L remains the same. So in equilibrium, it's possible that the capitalists stop production, only invest for better technology, and sell those to other countries who produce the output. So actually, I would draw your attention to a paper that was done by Belary Jones, Ron Jones, and myself in 2002 Pacific Economic Review, in which in a completely different context, we have shown that in Ricardian trade model, you can go beyond beyond complete specialization. Because remember, in Ricardo, you have absolute advantage in both goods, and you have comparative advantage in one good, you are going to export that good, completely specialized there. But then your knowledge of absolute advantage is lying idle. So even after you engage in trade, you can actually sell the knowledge of the good that you are not producing, because that good you could produce better than your partner. So there is a subsequent gains from trade by technology sale. So that we proved in a paper and this thing. And then, of course, whole issue of how the capital would be reallocated to, can be allocated to R&D is very much also related as in increase in growth rate due to virtual trade, or virtual trade as is very kind of very in thing, and how productivity is improved through virtual interactions and so on. And this is related also to our recent book, with Nishimuro of Bishopati and Nori Nakanishi of Kobe, which is just published in last February or March. I think Xaviers either must have purchased it or should purchase it. I'm just publicizing my book. So anyway, but now I'm going to be very quick because I don't want to, because this whole material is developing into a book. So I don't, I don't want to give, but I can actually have a specific factor model version of this, which I'm not going to explain to you right now. But let me go directly to the Heckscher-Ohlin thing, and I will tell you some basic results, and then I will close down because I think I can see that it's going to cross 1 hour, and I don't want to speak more than an hour. Okay. So, suppose I change the system. I say that at beginning at period T, of course, I have a stock of labor and credit, but also have stock of machines. That is, these machines have been produced in period T minus 1. So what we have, that beginning of any period, we inherit n number of machines and L number of people. L has to be employed and M machines need to be sold or used. Finance will come from K amount of saved funds, credit. M and L are used in fixed proportions in X and Y. So by, in terms of all practical purposes, this is Ricardo. So now the financing equation is K equal to WL plus PM into M, where both W and PM would be determined from the system. L and M are given because they are stock of labor and stock of machines. Now we can show that this function actually is a function of relative price and interest rate. How can you show that? Because now you go to two price equation where ALX is per unit labor requirement, AMX is per unit machine requirement for X. Then there is ALY and AMY. And then you can see that how you are constructing these two price equations. And therefore, given P and 1 plus R, P is the relative price, you can solve for W and PM by solve any 2 by 2 system. So therefore, you're in the first equation, K equal to WL plus PMN, That's a function of P and 1 plus R. Now, it's very interesting. Suppose I now freeze P. Suppose P does not change. I start with some given P. If I increase the interest rate or rate of return to capital, you see, it is like I'm squeezing the surplus that can go to the labor and the machine owners, because 1 plus R would effectively reduce the relative price, the prices, because it's like an increase in cost of production. And we apply the standard magnification effects that we all know from Ron Jones's 65 P's, that what you can get is that both W and PM will fall. If R goes up, both W and PM will fall, which means in that equation, so from this equation, these two equations, we can solve for W and PM given P and 1 plus R. If 1 plus R goes up given P, then what happens is W and PM must fall, because this right hand side is declining for both. If this happens, then what happens is that is 1 plus R as it will fall, your W will fall, 1 plus R as it rises, your W will fall and PM will fall, so your demand for credit will fall. So here is a demand for credit function. As 1 plus R goes up, your credit demand must fall. And your credit supply is given, so that will then determine equilibrium rate of interest, but that is at a given level of prices. Similarly, you can go to full employment conditions. Full employment conditions will tell you that you will determine X and Y. Then X and Y, as you determine, we have homothetic demand function, because with homothetic demand function and X by Y determined by L by M, then P will be determined. So as P is determined, we go back to this. As P is determined, everything is determined. Because given P, then from this, we can actually, because given P, I know that, how the P was the only other variable that we did not determine, but P will be determined. So what we have is that the fact that given P can determine R, W, this thing, and then with P I will determine from demand supply. So now this looks very much like Heckscher-Ohlin. Now I have one proposition I can just, suppose two countries with exactly the same labor and stock of machine with which they are scheme. So and then what is going to happen? They are going to produce the same level of output, because full employment condition, fixed coefficient, production function. So you're going to produce the same level of output in both, in both countries, which means that the relative price will be the same. If the relative price is the same, then trade will not take place. If trade does not take place in goods, but still you can trade finance, you can trade in factors of production and finance. Suppose a country has higher stock of credit, then the rate of interest in that will be lower. If the rate of interest will be lower, then given P, because P is world, is the world price, it's given. Given P, if the R is lower, sorry. Given P, if your R is lower, then this is higher, this is higher. So W and PM will be higher. So you have a situation where your R is lower, but W and PM is higher, because K is higher, that's why it is lower. And because R is lower, your W and PM are higher. Then what is going to happen is that these countries would have higher wage and higher price of machine and lower rate of interest. If this is the case, then higher amount of finance will attract workers and machines to this country and drive away capital or credit. Possibility, and I am not showing this here, but I leave to you, and I don't want to make this a sort of a tutorial class or something. So let's forget about it. Possibility that K scarce economy may actually export K. That possibility is there in this model. Now that I'm not going to explain right now, but the fact remains that if you have two identical countries with the same stocks of inputs, which are like factor endowments, But another typical factor, which is not really factor of production, but finance, if that is different, that is going to generate trade, but not in goods. It will generate trade in factors of production. So you can have migration, you can have machines being purchased or sold differently. That's sort of the goods part of trade. Then you can have migration, immigration, or you can also have capital flight or foreign investments inflow or outflow. Now, the other slides I'm not going to show is how these models, the Ricardian trade model changes with imperfect credit market. Nothing changes much. I am working on it, but that's you have to introduce a default and so on. But the fundamental points remain that it is the physical capital to labor ratio. So the 3 points, the fundamental points to remember, that without physical capital accumulation, wages will not increase in this model. This model looks, in terms of its results, very similar to how we developed our microeconomic teaching in classrooms. I can teach at least 5 lectures in microeconomic theory without introducing any smooth production function, cost function, envelope theorem, you name it. Then I can tell you that this is fundamentally, this is capturing some of the pronounced, very well-known neoclassical iconic models, because I'm applying wage fund to full implementation. This has implications for macro, whether credit is neutral or not. Pure credit is neutral in Ricardian model, but it is not when you bring in distortion like unemployment. And one can show, for example, I do not know whether you are studying the Krugman product variety trade model. If you're studying, I can show you that if there is full employment, then there is an increment in interest rates, but that is not a problem here. But if you have unemployment, then you have remarkable conclusions. You can show that higher amount of credit is going to increase number of varieties that you produce. So actually welfare goes up, and higher wages, as you understand, would reduce number of varieties. So basically there, this whole global welfare that would be affected. For example, suppose America has full employment, I don't have. So in my country, product varieties would be less. If my country goes towards full employment, varieties would be more, but these total varieties would be enjoyed by the entire globe. So basically, my unemployment affects the entire globe. And therefore, Krugman model would be sensitive to this credit issue once you bring in unemployment in the system. And these are some of the interesting things through which we can go along. And all of these are like the specific factor model, the Heckscher-Ohlin model, the imperfect competition model, the product variety and unemployment and credit market model. All these are planned chapters of this neo-Ricardian approach to the model of growth, trade, and inequality. And since the structure is very simple, the results are simple, but it gives you sort of new insights. For example, labor income is continuously dropping. Of course, if the countries, as you open up for more and more trade, like it doesn't matter which commodity you trade. It doesn't matter, because what is happening here, in Ricardo's trade model, not in Heckscher-Ohlin, Ricardo's trade model, you can export or import anything, but whatever you are exporting, all capital will flow there. So that means that sector will pay higher interest rate, and wage rate is not going to change. So inequality is going to go up. And if you bring in skilled and unskilled labor in the specific factor model, you can show how inequality is affected by this kind of scenario. I'm still exploring a lot of things, but this is how much the max. This is for now the extent of what I believe is interesting. And I am now expecting some questions and answers. I'm so sorry, I'm spoken a lot, but I got carried away. So thank you very much. And I finish by saying thank you very much. Bye.
Professor, having you grace this webinar has been a source of great pride for this department and this college, and the session has given us many new insights. I now request Dipanjan Mitra and Tavishi Rupani to take over the reins for the interactive session.
Thank you, Professor, for enlightening us with your address. The first question we have is, if there is complete mobility of finance capital with R equal to A as given world interest rate, how will the model work? What will be the effects of trade in financial assets in this type of a model?
Okay, so there is full mobility of capital. That's what you are suggesting, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's say that R is equal. Yeah, take the Ricardian trade model. I'll concentrate on Ricardian trade model because I'm not going to talk about the extensions. So let's take the Ricardian trade model. There, suppose R is equal to R star. So, you know, R cannot be changed, right? Does it change anything in terms of trade pattern? It does not, because still your relative price is equal to this ratio of the labor coefficient. So the trade outcomes are the same. Now, the question is that now if you concentrate, because what is going to happen is that at that, you know, if your interest rate is the same across countries, then the interest rate cannot go up when you trade, right? But your relative price, you know, so basically what is going to happen in that case, your relative price is going to increase, right? Now the interest rate in that country, if you don't allow it to go, up, the wages will have a tendency to go up, right? But if the wages go up, you know, the point is there is not sufficient credit, so the wage cannot go up. So it means that if your price go up and the average cost of production will go up, average cost of production cannot go up, then P is greater than AC. So if P is greater than AC, all resources will go up there. You know, all the resources will be, all labor force will go up there as we complete specialization. That will generate some sort of a surplus profit, which will be reflected in the rate of interest. So either the global capital, all global capital will try coming in to this place. That's exactly what is going to happen. So this is like you are freezing one unknown, but you are not changing the number of equations. So it means that there'll be tremendous flow of global capital into this economy, because your wage rate cannot increase, and your rate of interest, frozen rate of interest, means price would be greater than average cost. So somebody has to appropriate that surplus. Maybe it's good. Maybe the government is going to take away the surplus, because the government can, you know, see that produce at $10 a piece and sell at $15 a piece. So the government makes the money. That's okay.
Good evening, sir. Another question that we have is, if flow of international finance is allowed for, will there exist any binding constraint on supply of credit?
Flow of finance is allowed. There is no binding constraint on credit. The point is, yeah, so that is one possibility. If the flow of finances are perfect, you know, perfect finances are allowed, the perfect mobility of finances are allowed, then K equal to W by L will not, W into L possibly will not be there in the equation. So maybe K will be, you know, so it's like whatever, if you're, okay, so let me backtrack. Suppose you allow free mobility of capital, then there will be something will have to give in. Maybe wage rate will go up. Maybe you freeze the wage rate, the government will make the surplus. But yes, the credit constraint does not bind really. That's true. Credit constraint won't bind. That's true. That's true.
Sir, the next question is, do we consider migration of labor in your model?
Let me try to understand this. Okay. Let me try to understand this. Suppose we consider the Ricardian model and we have K by L equal to W, but in another country, K star by L star, that is greater. So basically W star is greater than W. So people will leave for that country. Now, what happens in this country is that as labor force leaves the country, because only way it can survive when your W would be equal to W star. But in that case, now L, the constraint there is not binding because so previously L was equal to K by W, right? So whatever employment you choose, now your L will fall and your W star, W will go up. So your L is leaving you and your W is at W star, so you employ less labor, L. That will determine the level of output of X and Y. And I believe that does not again affect the relative price if W changes to W star. That does not affect relative price. So the pattern of trade and everything is not going to be affected. W will increase up to W star. Labor endowment will fall, suppose, and therefore production of X and Y will fall. And if the price, suppose the country is actually trading at world prices or something, as I don't want to mess up with the prices, okay? In that case, the R will actually fall. And that's a very standard result, that if people leave your country for higher wages, then the local rate of return to capital or interest rate has to fall. These results are same as in any neoclassical model or anything.
Sir, another question is that is KPL fixed for a particular production process, and one country uses only one production process, because that's what we've studied in our UG levels in the Ricardian model.
Just a second. Yeah, in the UG level Ricardian studies, you have to start with, you have two sector model using only labor, right? And no capital.
Yes, sir.
That is your UG model. That's what I am used also. The only thing different is that in the UG model, there is no R, it's all W, and there is no separate equation determining W. So it is the UG model, but W is determined by K by L. So can you tell me or repeat the exact nature of the question? I think I am missing something here. So what is your exact question? Hello?
So we just wanted to know about the production process. Only one production process is used by a country, or more than that?
You mean, no, to start with, I have taken a two sector model, but you are saying that there are two production processes, means what? Two different technologies to produce the same good? Or
yes, sir,
production?
technologies.
There is another technology. But the problem is that here, with labor as only factor of production, you will be choosing only the most efficient technology. One that at a given wage, which is less costly, you will be using that technology. So that cannot survive actually. A high cost technology cannot survive.
So the next question is, in one of the results, it was stated that finance flowing only to R&D, it will eliminate production completely. Can you please explain that last phrase?
Yeah, sure. Okay, first, I'll go step by step. Think of that there are two sectors. One that produces good, the other produces new technology or an R&D sector. Second assumption is, suppose this is the same labor which can produce a good or they can actually do R&D. I'm just trying to give you an example. So I'm deliberately trying to be unrealistic. So it's not skilled labor or unskilled labor or anything. Then, wherever you put labor, you pay them a wage rate which is K by L. Because the total employment is L and your wage bill is WL, that has to be equal to the total stock of credit. So stock of credit by L gives you W. So it doesn't matter whether they produce a good or produce a technology, you are giving them the wage rate. Okay. And suppose they're always successful in getting you a new technology. That means they give you a cheaper labor cost of production. Mind you, W cannot change. And you are producing a good at a world price. So the price is given to you. Then the only thing that can increase is rate of return to capital or the rate of interest to credit, to loans. Because the price equal to cost equation tells you that. Which means that if I allocate more and more workers to R&D and they are successful in getting some new technology, I am the financier, my income is going up. But workers' income is remaining the same. I am not paying them more. So I will always try to do that. So there would be complete specialization in the sector, in the R&D sector by this country. And then total labor supply would be producing the maximum possible R&D output that promises the least labor coefficient or the most innovative technology. So this country would say, okay, let me produce technology in the world. I will sell technology to the world. Let the world produce. Because whoever producing with that technology will give me this rate of return. I'll get this payment. Because the fact is that I am giving them technology and I can tell them that, whatever return you are getting before, you are not now going to get more than this, you have to pay me back that. That's the maximum I can extract from them. So this is how a nation would be completely specialized in producing technology and not product.
So this brings us to the end of the interactive session. Thank you, Professor, for answering our questions. So now we move on to Adria.
Thank you so much, Professor, for giving us your time and this opportunity to interact with you. This has been an enriching experience for all of us. We now call upon Dr. Pia Ghoshal, Head of the Postgraduate Department of Economics, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to everyone who are with us today in this enriching academic discourse. On behalf of the Postgraduate Department of Economics, I wish to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Sugata Marjit for his enlightening presentation, which will help students and teachers alike. We have always benefited from the new dimensions introduced by Sir, which act as a motivation for several young researchers of today. Today has been no exception, Sir. Thank you, Sir, for sparing your very valuable time to address the gathering and for highlighting the issues that we need to deliberate on. We earnestly express our sincere gratitude to our respected Father Principal, Reverend Dr. Dominic Savio, SJ, for always motivating us, for guiding us, and for being a constant support in all our endeavors. Without his valuable inputs and encouragement, this event would not have been possible. Thank you, Father. We also wish to thank our respected Vice Principal, Professor Batram Da Silva, for his constant support and for responding with patience to all our requests. Sir has always guided us and shown us the correct path in all our daily endeavors. I also take this opportunity to thank Dean of Science, Professor Tapati Dotto, and the Dean of Arts, Professor Orgho Banerjee, for their constant support. On behalf of my department, I wish to take this opportunity to specially thank Professor Joyti Ghosh Dostidar and Professor Romi Beed from Postgraduate Department of Computer Science for always helping us and our department in organizing our webinars. I also wish to thank my faculty members for always providing encouragement to me and to the students with respect to all academic issues. A very special thanks to the convener, Professor Ranjan Nag, who had taken extreme care to plan out the program. Last but not to thank the students whose tireless efforts have made this event possible. And finally, I thank all the participants who have made this webinar successful. I declare this webinar closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all for tuning in. It has been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you.